Hi friends, I'm Pam and welcome to A Scrappy Little Joy. Today is Saturday and we have a bonus weekly whim block. If you have been with us long enough, you know that our weekly whim block release day is always on Wednesday. Well, we have an extra special little block for you today. It is our next block. So you'll remember on Wednesday when we created our block 7, and I noticed block 7 here twice. Remember, I make these twice. This is our sample and this is the one that we made together. Regardless, I just wanted to see so much pretty on our board here. And Mr. Woods, by the way, is working on a way that we can see more of this, and we'll work that out. That's coming down the pike, because as the more blocks we make, the more I want us to be able to start to visualize how these blocks can start to go together, because we are creating this one block at a time. Okay, so you will recall on Wednesday that I asked you to save your corners. These, remember this unit here was a stitch and flip corner, and I asked you to save that. If you didn't save it, that's okay. But we can, in other words, we can make it work if you didn't, if your dog ate it or something like that. That's what we talked about. But today, our block is called A Gathering of Scraps. And if you need the cutting instructions, you will find those in the description section below. There's a link to my blog called Pam Selkirk Designs, and it will take you straight to the page where you can download our block 8. Which is called, I think I said, A Gathering of Scraps. And this block, any other block that you are looking for, are all going to be at that same spot. If for some reason you want to go back to that, you can just go to pamselkirkdesigns.com, and then it's right at the top in the menu, A Scrappy Little Joy YouTube channel. And you'll click on that page and it will take you to the page that is in the link in our description. Also, for those of you who are new, for those of you who have been here for a while, if you like what you're seeing here and want to share it, I would be delighted. I'd be so grateful if you would do that. If you want to click the subscribe button, the little bell, share, like, comment, anything that you'd like to do that helps me to be able to bring more of this scrappy joy out to the world, to your fellow quilters, my fellow quilters, anybody that you think might be interested in this. I would really appreciate it. So anyway, A Gathering of Scraps. Here is our block, okay? And what you will see is this is our, formerly, I'm calling this our A unit, and this our B unit, and then this is our C unit for this particular block. It'll change for our extra blocks, but that'll come next. This is actually the AB and the CD of our last week block. So if you have that sheet, that cutting sheet handy, that may help you to be able to just reference so that you remember which fabrics we're talking about here. Now, before we get started, if for some reason you are not digging the idea of 3 blocks with these fabrics, they're going to be right next to each other, and we'll talk about that more. If you're not digging these particular fabrics and you want to change up, then feel free to cut. You would have to cut an extra one of each of these, and you'd have a little bit left over, because these we're making, this is going to be 2 at a time. So you'll make 2 more, but you would at least be able to change your mind. If you want to change your fabrics, then you can do that down here by just cutting 2 of everything instead of 1. And then for the E, you would need 3, okay? Okay, so let's get started. I'll just leave that right there because that's where it seems to be most comfortable for us. So here is our block. And here, if you remember, as I said, these are the corners that we trimmed off. And I hope that you were able to keep them together with the partner they were with, or that was trimmed off from your block. It's just going to make it easier to sew together, but I can't say that there's any reason you couldn't switch them around or try and match them up, as long as they're pretty much the same size. Okay, I'm going to take my shoes off as I do, and we're going to sew all of these triangle pairs together with a scant 1/4 inch. Now remember that this is on the bias, and remember what the bias is. It's on the diagonal, it's not on the straight grain. So if you look here, also if you had a look at my half score triangle, Everything you never knew you wanted to know about half square triangles, it's in our Scrappy Starters section. It's a brand new series that I just shared earlier this week. This talks a little bit more about triangles, about half square triangles on the bias. Also, it talks about all other multiple half square triangle techniques that we will be doing here later in this particular video. So, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on all of our diagonals here, and we're just going to try, as we are, two things. Leaders and enders are probably going to be helpful here. Otherwise, as you tuck this little corner in, it's going to want to go right into that hole the minute that needle goes into your fabric, okay? So this is where leaders and enders are really helpful, having that extra piece of fabric already there started. And I'm just going to take that and sort of give this a tug as it pulls this in. And then I'm going to let my feed dogs and my presser foot take this. And I'm not going to do any tugging or stretching or pulling on it. I'm going to let it just move through. And then I'm going to let this piece be my leader for the next one. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sew these together with a scant 1/4 inch, all 8 of them. And I'll have Mr. Woods do a little zippy zip here while you sew yours, and I'll sew mine. And then we'll come back together because we've got some specifics about pressing that we want to come together on before we move on. Okay, where are my snippers? Okay, we are all set. Look at our little party of, looks like a bunting, doesn't it? So we will snip these apart. And then we'll talk about how we want to press them, because it's going to be different and we're going to break a quilting rule, okay? A quilt police rule. And you know how much I love doing that. I don't love the idea of there being hard, fast rules, and I will tell you, some of those kept me from quilting early on when I felt like I had to just really stick to the way the rule book on things. And I have learned that veering away from the rule book is just fine, because it's your quilt, my quilt. And if we can make things easier on us in terms of pressing and folding and joining and nesting, we're going to do that, and we're going to forego some other rules that get in the way. Okay, so if you look at our little illustration here, you're going to see, and I'm not going to press mine yet, because remember, I like to trim mine with my little corner trimmer before I press. You might like to use a square ruler with a diagonal, or if you watched my video, my half square triangle video, you'll see some other tips in there, even if you don't have a diagonal. But I want to show you that we want the fabric A units to be in the corners, okay? And if we want those in the corners, now this is going to be just a little bit tricky, guys. This little pinwheel can be I've sewn it together multiple times, and I have ripped seams multiple times, because you really have to just go, okay, now which angle and which diagonal? Okay, so if this is going in the center, this way, then let's look. We need our corner units to press toward the fabric A, so toward the corners. If that is the case, then we are going to need this unit here, which is going to set like that. We're going to need this unit to press toward the lighter fabric. In this case, it's a lighter fabric. If you're using the same fabrics likely that you did for your block 7, this is a lighter fabric, and this is a lighter fabric. And this is where the quilt police rule comes in. But we need these, if we're going to get them to nest, we need them to press. We need this one, these 4 center, to press toward the lighter fabric. It's no big deal. Again, I have never heard anyone say, well, good grief, whoever made that quilt, I can see their seam allowance through that because they didn't press to the dark side. I've never heard anybody say that. They just go, oh my gosh, what an amazing quilt. That's the thing about being a quilter, friends. So many people are not quilters and they're like, oh my goodness, you are amazing. I just put half square triangles together, or I just put squares together. Quilts, no matter how expertly they are done, how intricate they are done, made, they are works of art, and they are works of your art and my art, and they speak to a lot of hard work. So make sure that you're making that a priority when you're thinking about the mistakes that you may make in your blocks, or the seam allowances that don't necessarily line up perfectly, okay? It is your work of art, and it is you growing and becoming. So that is my little pep talk about that. I am going to trim all of my half square triangles to 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to press them, as we just said, the corners toward the corners, and these ones toward what is the fabric D from our block 7, okay? And then we can come back. I'll let Mr. Woods zippy right through this part of us trimming and pressing, and then we'll come back to get it all laid out and get it all together, and then we'll talk about the other 2 blocks that are going to be similar. So, okay, you do you, I'll do me, and we'll come back together. Okay, one little tip I have, ooh, warmish. One little tip I have, and I just made an error over here, and it reminded me, and I was going to real quick fix it, but it reminded me of something you might not know that you might appreciate. When you are, when you press, remember these needed to be pressed toward the lighter fabric D. Well, I pressed this one toward the darker fabric C. Instead of me just flipping that over, I've already pressed it the one way, so I've already told it, I want you to go this way. And when I try to just press it the other way, it goes, wait, you told me to go that way. So what we want to do is reset that seam entirely. Just bring it back together like a little sandwich, and then just hold your iron on it for a minute, so that it has a minute to just sort of reset itself back to, oh, you didn't press me in any direction at all. I've completely forgotten. So then we're going to cool it off, and we're going to try again. And it's going to make it so much happier, and it's going to want to move in that direction so much more comfortably than if you had just forced it to do it without resetting it back to its flat self. Okay? There we go. All right, I'm going to move that for the moment. Now, let's lay our little guys out. And this is where, friends, I have sewn this block together so many times and ripped out seams. I probably said that. But the reality is that it's kind of a tricky block if you realize we can always do our corners first. We know our corners all go the same way, out to the corners. But it's that middle pinwheel. Oh, what's that doing? It's that middle pinwheel that is not happy. And I'm going to spritz a little water on this guy because it's pressing in the wrong direction. I just want to, there we go. It's kind of halfway pressed in one way, halfway pressed in another. Okay, so I'm going to really work to follow this illustration to place all of my center, my plus triangles, if you will, in the proper direction. Is that correct? I do believe that is correct. Let's just put those all together so we can start to see the way the pinwheel is going to move. Okay, so now we're going to do our columns again for this one. Oh, where is our center? Here's our center. And this is that center fabric that I chose for this one. You may choose a different fabric in there. You may want to pull any one of these other fabrics. Remember, this is your quilt. This is going together just the way you want it to go together. I'm going to sew this column together, this column together, and this column together, and then we'll come back together and we'll talk about pressing. So let me interrupt Mr. Woods's zippy zip here and just say, because I am doing the chain, it might I might be inclined to just pair these together, sew them, pair these together, sew them, so that I can just continue going on with a chain. I don't like to do that with this kind of a block because invariably I will switch it around, twist it around. So I really do sew these two together, put my little next leader ender in, and then I bring it back to my mat, to my design board and say, okay, where do you live? Is that where you're supposed to go? Yep. And then I put them together. And you see here, friends, why we nested, or why we pressed toward the lighter fabric here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to nest this here. See that? So that's why we did it. Sometimes a comfortable seam is better than trying to make it invisible. So, okay, back to work. Okay, now before we press these and join them, we need to make sure that we have lined these up the way they are supposed to go. Look at your illustration, because I've done it several times and I just keep going, oh, that looks perfectly fine. And then I'm like, what was I thinking? This looks perfectly fine. This is right. Okay, so I am going to press these seam allowances all going down. Mr. Woods reminds me that I need to, because he does all the producing of these videos and he has watched his mom quilt and for much of his childhood, and then his wife quilt for, you know, his adult life. He knows an awful lot about quilting, and he will sometimes say to me, make sure you're explaining that a little bit better. So in case you wonder who is your background cheerleader besides me, Mr. Woods is your background cheerleader, because he gives me all kinds of ideas and he makes sure that I know that there are things that are a little confusing to him, and he's been exposed to quilting. So anyway, yeah, Mr. Woods, we love him for that. Then we're going to press that one down, we're going to press this one up, and we're going to press this one down, our seam allowances in those directions so that they nest. Some of you we've talked about that. Some of you, you know, Mr. Woods just thinks I need to be making sure I'm reminding those that may be new to us as we go along, and I could not agree more. Because the other thing is, some of you are coming in different places. So if you're just seeing this video, the first video, for your first video, and you haven't seen block 1 or all the way back, then I get it. Okay, so now this column goes to this column, and then this column will go to this column. We could pin here, wouldn't be the worst idea, to keep things moving along expeditiously today. Since it's Saturday and I feel like you guys have, I don't know, some plans. It's autumn in the woods. It's cooling off here. Anyway, so I'm not going to pin. You can pin if you feel like it, but I'm going to just cross my fingers and work my magic, do the best I can. Again, often what I will do is we'll get past one seam. I'll get past one seam, and then I'll just set my next seam, and I'll hold my finger on it until I get right underneath there. And then sometimes I'll hold my middle finger here, over here, just to make sure that seam doesn't shift when it goes under the needle. Little tricks that you start to teach yourself. I was teaching my youngest daughter, who lives in Scotland, I was teaching her crochet. I've been doing that the last couple, because I crochet, and she's crocheted, she knows how to crochet, but she forgets, you know. And it's been some time. And so I was teaching her to crochet. And the thing about crochet is that it really is about coordinating your fingers and your hands and teaching yourselves, getting that muscle training. So your muscle memory, so you know exactly how to hold your yarn taut in certain ways, and then how to loosen it when you need it to be loosened. So it takes practice. But the little mechanisms that we do as we go along and we learn, and I talk about holding my middle finger right on that seam so that it isn't inclined to shift under my needle. Even though I can't hold it right under my needle, I can hold it right next to the presser foot. There we go. Okay. Leaders and enders. I wanted to tell you, friends, I have come up with 60 of my little squares. So now I'm going to start to really put together a plan for, I have a plan in my mind, but I need to lay it out so that I really can get an idea of how big that's going to be and how big I want to make it. So I'll share more about that soon. Okay, here we go. You could press this with your seams in or out, and it wouldn't be too terrible. There are a lot of bulky seams here. I'm going to press my seams open, and you guys, you can press your seam however you feel like you would like them to press. But again, since we don't know what this is sewing to, we're not going to worry about what it's sewing to. We're just going to say, I'm just working for the flattest seams possible, which I think usually makes our points most, makes them shine most. Sometimes just that little bit of fold when we're pressing, when we press to one side or the other, our points aren't as crisp and aren't as clear. Look at that, and that's so cute. I love it so much. Okay, so that is our first block. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to get you started making the second block. You've seen how this whole block goes together, but what we're going to do is replicate this. These are our little strike-offs. They were our trim-offs, but we can make those same triangle, half square triangle units by taking our same fabrics that we started with. And you'll reference down here, and it says right here, I believe I explained right here that you'll want to, from your block 7 instructions, these are fabric A, fabric B. Look how many design mats I have, friends. So now I'm just using them all over the place, right? Okay, and that is fabric C, and this is fabric D, and I've cut 2 of fabric E. Again, if you want to, and this is going to give us the half square triangles that we need. If you want to change up and make these 3 blocks all different, or 3 same, but just different fabrics, you can do that. Just go ahead and get yourself 2 of all of these. You're going to wind up with leftover square or leftover half square triangles. You can make some cute little mug rug or something out of that. That's always a fun thing to do. And then you'll need 3 of these. So let's kind of go through the process of how this is going to go. If you saw my half square triangle video, you will know that there are 2 at a time, 4 at a time, and 8 at a time techniques, all discussed and taught in that half square triangle video. So I will make sure that I put down in the description here a link to that so that you don't have to go hunting for it if you want more information. On the back of your fabric B and your fabric D, you're going to need a diagonal line in each direction, okay? I have made that here, and what I'm going to do, I could pin this if I want to pin this, if I don't want my fabrics to shift, or I think if I'm concerned that my fabrics are going to shift. We've got our diagonal line here. I am going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of each line for both units, and I've just sandwiched these right sides together. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back together and we'll just do kind of the wrap up of where we're at and how to get through this next part so that we've got 3 little blocks. Okay, you do that part and I'll do this part, and Mr. Woods can zippy right here. Okay, so now what we have are our 2 units with scant 1/4 inch diagonal lines on each side of those drawn lines. Let's go ahead, and where is my, I would like my slightly bigger mat. This one is too big for rotating, and I really like to be able to rotate my mat when I'm trimming these types of dealios. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to cut right on the diagonal line for this one. Then I'm going to turn my mat. My little pink mat is a little bit too small for this one. And then on this one, and then I want to turn it so that I can cut on this line and this line. And the way I'm going to do that, and we talked about this in the half square triangle video, is we're going to line up a line here, and then we're going to make sure this is going right down the middle. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Okay, and then all those guys are going to go here, and then we're going to do the same thing here. There. Okay, and those are all trimmed. So what we have here, friends, are just what we started with before, only the diagonal line is already sewn on there. So these are, there's 8 of each. So that would make you have the supplies for 2 of the blocks that we just did, okay? Remember, you're going to trim those to 2.5 inches, just like we did with the first one, okay? And then what you'll have, I don't have samples of those, although I should. I have so many square blocks. Hang on, I bet I do. I literally bet I do, except I haven't trimmed these. But let me show you how these are going to differ, okay? These aren't trimmed, but these are going to differ in that they're going to flip the corner. They're going to flip each little half square triangle is going to be flipped differently. So that will mean you'll have 2 squares on the outside, 2 blocks on the outside with one different one in the middle. And frankly, you can switch it around however you want to do that. If you want to have this first unit kind of the way we made it this way with the lighters, and you want to make 2 of those, and you can do that the other way. But my point simply is that if this unit has the this unit going that way, then we're going to tip it in and put it the other way, right? And this guy is going to go like this. And then what it's going to give us, just take a look at this, friends. Look at our 3 little half square triangle pinwheel blocks and how this guy is in the center. And it's just a nice complement. Now then start to think about what goes beneath a block like this. Nice little rectangle of 3 of the same block. So that is what this is all about this week for block 8. Lickety split. I'm going to let you finish your blocks, and if you have any questions about how they get assembled, you just can rewind in this video. We will be back next Wednesday as regularly scheduled for block 9. I'm sure there will be some other little funsies in there. I've got something I'm working on my long arm right now that I want to share with you as well. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this sweet little gathering of scraps blocks in this extra special day of the Weekly Whim on Saturday. I'll see you next time.